pro-Ukrainian, pro-Western activists and politicians. Zelensky today, he said himself that he is likely to be executed. The president of Ukraine, you can believe it or not. Why not threaten Putin and his sycophant allies in the Kremlin with being declared war criminals at the International Criminal Court? That is quite a tough step, but I think it's warranted in this present environment.
But which of those steps that you've outlined, sorry to interrupt, Professor, which of those steps do you think will actually have an impact on Vladimir Putin? I heard one former head of MI6 in an interview earlier today saying there had been a failure of imagination among Western countries to think about what he was prepared to do. You're dealing with a particular type of personality, aren't you? Someone who will order the kind of activity that we're seeing going on now in Ukraine. So what is going to make a difference? What will really hit home with Vladimir Putin, do you think?
I think those kind of areas I've just explained. I agree with that assessment. I agree that there has been an unwillingness to accept what kind of person is sitting in the Kremlin. He's a sociopath. He doesn't give a damn about human life, Russian or non-Russian. And so, yes, I agree that there is a need to understand what we have there. But those two steps are important steps, and I think that supplying Ukraine with weapons that can bring down Russian aircraft and missiles, an air exclusion zone, declaring Putin and his allies war criminals, all those are quite radical steps. If there is growing, I think, discontent in Russia, there are even Russian soldiers who have given themselves up to Ukrainian soldiers saying, we don't want this war. I don't think this war has the basis of so much popularity in Russia as annexing the Crimea 8 years ago. So we need to push that advantage. The final factor, which was ignored by the sanctions, because there was opposition in Europe, they're supporting Britain and America, but opposition in Europe is taking Russia out of SWIFT. That would really bring down the Russian economy, and in the same way the sanctions really damaged Iran. Why are the Europeans afraid to go in that direction? Putin is not only declaring war against Ukraine, he's at war with us in the West. He sees the war in Ukraine as a war with the West.
And just briefly, Professor, you mentioned Crimea, and there was much more preparation of the Russian public, wasn't there, for the fact that that was going to happen? Less so in this instance. Does that say to you that Vladimir Putin sees himself as being in a pretty unassailable position?
Well, I think it's a mixture of many things. Firstly, Crimea has always had high popularity in Russia. It's a bit like Kosovo for the Serbs. I mean, it's their Jerusalem. That's how they mythologize about Crimea. And the last 8 years, there's been a steady 86% support in Russia for the annexation. That's not true in Russia for an invasion of Ukraine. Putin does not have that high level of support. There's discontent even within the Russian officer class about this. And the more we make it painful for Russia, the more that discontent will grow. It's also, you're right, there wasn't that kind of public support, but that's also because Putin has been isolated for the last 2 years during the COVID pandemic, and he's become a dictator. He's surrounded by sycophants. Nobody's telling him anything he doesn't want to hear, as it were. And so I think he's very isolated, and he's become more xenophobic, more kind of angry, and more, in that sense, obsessed with Ukraine. And he is obsessed with Ukraine. He sees Ukraine as a Russian land that needs to be brought back to heel, as it were, and transformed into a second Belarus.
Professor Taras Kuzio from the Henry Jackson Society, thank you very much.